Hello, everyone, as they start to get into our live fireside chat conversation here. I am beyond smitten, like, cannot express how smitten I am about this conversation because there is just a power crew of people in this conversation alongside just various walks of life and experience. And so, hopefully, you don't hear from me and you're hearing from everyone else who is so awesome. So to kick things off, I would love for folks to introduce themselves, what they do, and then just briefly what their developer education is. I don't know if we're all in the same order, so just to keep things simple, I'll just kind of name call. So Rizal, you want to start?
Yes, I can start. So, you said my name and my developer education, right?
Yeah, and what you do, if you want to share what you
And
do.
what I do? Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Rizelle Scarlett. I'm a staff developer advocate at Block. Um, and my background is it's kind of varied. So I did do a coding boot camp, but after that, I got a degree in computer science at BU. So I kind of have like a mix. But yeah, that's me.
I love that. Awesome. David.
Hey, I'm David Beal. I'm a site reliability engineer at a company called Pay Near Me. I have a background as a backend developer, DevOps, sort of all that stuff. I have a GED. I think I lost it. I don't know if it still counts. But I taught myself how to code in IRC channels and Usenet and running Slackware on my computer in 1999, and just kind of never looked back.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Great joke you threw in there. Aaron.
Hey y'all, I'm Erin McHale Staples. I am a senior developer experience engineer at Galileo. Previously was at LaunchDarkly and Human Signal, so very familiar with the AI ML space. My coding background is a bit chaotic. Like, I do remember being the friend in high school that made everybody's live journal pages and MySpace pages and Tumblr templates. Like, that was and Sims 2 custom content code. Like, that was my diehard, like, learn to code stuff. But I thought it was never for me and was really bored in the traditional education sense. So the only formal developer education I have is actually through data science. I took 2 semesters of data science in grad school. And then totally self-taught beyond that.
Very, very cool. Mike, you're up.
My name is Mike Gayhard. I'm a staff software engineer at a company called Artium. We're a small consulting company. I've actually have a bachelor's in chemical engineering and then went back to school and got a master's in software engineering. So learned to write C++ in like the late 90s. Did engineering work, was like, ooh, these computers are going to be a thing. Maybe I should get into this. And then ended up getting my master's degree in software engineering. And I taught for a while in Chicago. And I've been writing software for 25 years, something like that.
That is incredible. Love it. Jerome.
Hey, how you doing? Um, I have a degree in police science. It was the degree that was paid for the Air Force because my background was international investigations and law enforcement. Uh, so that's my professional education background. Everything was software engineering is self-taught. I think my story's pretty out there. Business Insider wrote about it. I saw a ITT Tech commercial talking about databases, and I saw a code.org commercial when they first got hot with Mark Zuckerberg on there and Bill Gates, and I was like, what are these nerds talking about? And I picked up a book from Starbucks, not Starbucks, it had a Starbucks in it, Barnes and Nobles, that had a database, databases and Postgres book, and I taught that, and I taught myself that, and then a year later, Department of Homeland Security picked me up as a database analyst, which is ironic because when I applied using my military background, they were like, "Thank you for your service, but you don't have any, we don't have any jobs for you here." And so it's kind of funny that the thing that I taught myself was what got me in the door in government service work. Versus the thing that already having had government service background. After that, realized that the amount of people that I can't stand and that can't stand me has went down from an entire country to maybe like a few people at work. And I was like, there's air conditioning and no one's trying to shoot me. It doesn't feel like high school. No one's trying to kick my ass. I absolutely love it here, and I was like, I'm gonna stay in tech. And that was 2009, 2010. I've been there ever since. Everything I've learned has been kind of just a dedicated long slodge of like educating and reading docs, because in the military we got boring SOPs, but in tech the SOPs actually help you make money. So I'm a big fan of just reading people's documentation. And then when for work, I Microsoft by day and Metsu Code by any other waking moment like this, where I've helped 308 veterans and military spouses now. At
Woo.
20, I'm almost at $20.2 million in salaries that I've helped veterans and military spouses get. So I'm very happy about that. I'm trying to get to the big 2.5 next year, see what happens. But yeah, that's it. That's me. That's my entire lifetime story. Yeah.
As a side note, you should check out Vets Who Code, really awesome organization that Jerome is the executive director at. Chris, you're up.
I don't know how to follow that. Jerome,
I'm
thank you
sorry.
for your
I'm glad I went. I'm
Yeah.
glad I went before him.
I don't know how to follow that. But I'm a software engineer. I work for a company called Live Oak Bank out of Wilmington, North Carolina. We do small business loans, et cetera, et cetera. We're getting up in the fintech world. I've been in this 13 years now, comp sci IT degrees. Done a little bit of everything: iOS, DevOps, front end, back end, full stack with AWS, yada, yada. Learned a lot, done a lot. Glad to be here.
I am thankful that all of you are here, and you're all equally awesome. Jerome is doing something super cool. I agree. But the reason that y'all are here is because you've all been a part of my network and also do awesome things for the developer ecosystem. So,
It's you versus you, man. Don't look at my resume. Like it's I'm weird. So don't compare yourself to me. Like y'all, working with you helps me. Meeting people like you helps me get other veterans hired. So it's cool.
That's how it all goes around. Okay, we're going to start with the most controversial question, and we'll let the conversation go from there. As we all chatted about before we got in here and we went live, and I think what we are all seeing around the interwebs right now is a lot of commentary of, am I going to lose my job? Are developers going to no longer have a job? And so I would love to get answers from all of you on that, and then let the conversation sort of just naturally flow where it goes, and we can kind of dive in as the topics arise. If anyone is watching and has something that they specifically want to add to the chat, please do. I will be monitoring that. Let's go the opposite path. And I don't know if you all see each other in the same order, but let's start with Chris and then end with Rizal in the same order if we can. Otherwise, I can help sort of wayfind. I'd love to hear all of yours opinion on if we think that AI is going to get rid of our jobs. Like, are we going to be jobless due to AI?
This is probably the most common question I get from our junior and mid-level engineers. I don't get it a lot from seniors. Maybe seniors are well informed or so forth. But one of the most common fears is we've got folks who are learning this industry, who are fresh and a year in, 2 years in, 5 years in, even they're seeing AI being able to go and do their work faster than them, and in a lot of cases more accurate than them, and they're scared, right? And so what I tell a lot of folks is, use it as a tool, use it to make yourself more quote unquote powerful, faster, more efficient, but it's certainly not going to replace us, because we still have to check it. We still have to make sure it's right.
I like that last part that he said. People still want someone to blame when it comes to something not working, right? Managers, MBA program managers, engineering managers, the CEO, they still want to know, who do I need to fire when this thing that is very business critical isn't working? And they're not going to put that in the responsibility of the AI. So no, software engineering jobs aren't going anywhere. Just to piggyback on what he said. Two, like I said, military background. I'm a big adapting over con fanatic, right? The ideology that software and that AI is going to take our jobs is not, it's just not accurate. It's like, what is truly happening, especially what I've seen in the past 2 years, is that AI is going to evolve our jobs. What 3 years ago was a mid-level engineer is a junior now, right? You have to understand more of the software engineering life cycle, developer life cycle, when it comes to writing code than when you could get by without knowing that stuff, just focusing on syntax and just writing code. But now you have to know, how is this code? You have to score the code yourself. You have to refactor. You're having to look, okay, what is this missing that needs to that this, because the number one weakness that AI has, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, is it doesn't understand context. Right? It doesn't. I can tell it to build a thing, but I can't tell it to build a thing based upon this type of client, right? It's going to be hilariously wrong, and it's like, okay, I shouldn't trust you with anything that makes real money. So you're gonna go over here as an assistant, and I'm gonna do all this real work. So like that's what I try to tell my newer troops. Like, so what you should focus on is understanding the software engineering life cycle, focusing on, hey, how do I use this as an assistant to work and pull in on the things that, I may not be as good at, but I can go deeper on other areas. Like I can focus more on thinking like a programmer versus being afraid of what is going to happen with that.
I think Mike, you're up in line.
Yep. Where do we go with this? So I have heard multiple times, I agree it's going to change our jobs. I mean, I've actually been using it as a pair programming partner. So I worked at Pivotal Labs for, off and on for 13 years. So I was used to pairing 8 hours a day with another human. So I think it is a great pair. I mean, as a senior engineer, I can tell it what I want it to do because I know in my head what I want it to do. I just don't have to type anymore. I've been practicing this thing called chat-oriented programming. I forget who coined that term, but I just tell the computer what I want to do. And I think where juniors will struggle is they don't have that in their head. So they can't say, oh, I want this class with this type, just go type it out. I think where we will struggle as an industry is to figure out how to use junior engineers. I mean, I disagree. I can actually probably the things we give juniors to learn, we could probably replace with AI. The downside of that being is how do we get mid-level and senior engineers if there are no junior engineers? Like we cut off a whole part of the chain if we don't allow junior engineers to graduate up. So while I agree we could probably replace junior engineers with AI for certain tasks, that would only kill the rest of the pipeline up the chain. So I think as an industry, I mean, I taught one of the first coding boot camps. I was at Living Social when Jeff Casimir started Hungry Academy, which launched kind of the boot camp revolution. I taught at Galvanize for a year. So I know what those folks look like. We would do ourselves a big disservice in industry if we replaced junior engineers with AI, because then we wouldn't have mid-level or senior engineers. So I don't know. I don't know where it's going to end up. I mean, with the leaps and bounds that AI is taking, it is going to change. If I never have to fix another dependency problem in a code base, I can just say, go update a bunch of dependencies. If my tests break, because I test drive everything, if my tests break, just iterate on this thing till it's done. I don't ever want to have to do that again. I don't think anybody should ever have to do that. But with that comes learning. So, I don't know where it's going to end up. I think we're gonna iterate on it for a while. I think some people will replace juniors. I think some people won't replace juniors. Like we're in that weird, like, I don't even know phase what this is going to look like because we just don't know. So that was a lot of rambling. Hopefully it made sense. But, as people are saying, we're not going to replace junior engineers. It's up to us as an industry to still support them. But if we can stop doing some jobs, I think we will all become more efficient.
I like that answer. Aaron, you're up.
Well, that was probably the best segue ever. If we could just stop doing some jobs, we'd all be more efficient. Like, let's be honest, if AI is going to take my job, I'm going to the beach. I'll meet you there. Like, if we don't have jobs, let's just outsource this to the robot. I'll see you at the beach. We'll have a great time. Like, and I think that's the attitude that we need to have. Like, again, being self-taught, I totally agree with others have said. Like, one of the gaps I had being self-taught is I had to go back and read like the textbooks, because I'd be like, oh, I understand the syntax, I understand what this function does, but like, how does this fit in the larger production system? Or you practice and you learn off these very pretty examples, and then you're thrown into an actual code base in the production world, and you're like, who built this? This doesn't follow everything that the textbook said. So going and like, however, I will say it gave me the context needed to ask better questions. Like, I'm learning a little bit of Go right now. I have not done Go until early this year. And the syntax is so different from what I'm used to. And I'm finding myself doing both like a hybrid study. So I'm studying half using that like ChatGPT or Cursor or whatever, asking 1,000 questions, but also having the native Go documents pulled up in a book next side of it, because I'm getting how it fits together, which is super helpful. And I'm still able to expand on that. My argument, like thinking about this like level of like what makes a junior, what makes a senior, and so on, I actually argue that we should spend like 10 years ago, right? We were all like, learn to code, and that's how you get your first job in tech. And that's what you do. But I don't think that's the way into it anymore. I think if you have a developer that does not understand product thinking, or you have a developer who doesn't want to talk to customers, you're probably not going to have a job. Like, just case in point, like that developer experience is going to become so much more essential. Good documentation is going to become so much more essential, because that's what these models are trained after. Product thinking, how does your code tie to the bottom line of the business? Which I know some people don't want to think about, but if you have an error, what does that mean? What does that cost look like? How do you care? Like, what day do you deploy, or how do you release new features, and how does that impact the business? And I think these are the questions that developers have to get better at, which is very interesting, as I came from the product side of things. So being able to I find myself in engineering rooms probably being the really annoying person, because I'm like, we have to be thinking about these product questions now, because if we don't, guess what? Some dude who's never wrote a line of code in the past, who's very well product centered, is going to run us over.
David, I think you're up. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Definitely with, honestly, I agree with everyone up to this point, but I think my answer might be a little more harsh. And my answer to that question broadly is maybe. There's a pretty good chance that you're going to lose your job. You're definitely going to lose a job for AI in the next couple of years, especially if you're asking yourself that question. And there are ways to safeguard yourself from it. And it might not be what everyone wants to hear, because it's not possible for everyone. And that is, are you a creative thinker? Do you have an art practice? Do you have something that like exercises your brain outside of coding in a way that makes you think abstractly about the code that you do write? Every superhero developer I've known has been a phenomenal musician, or takes beautiful photos, or, has this art practice that refills the tank and allows them to think abstractly about things that are pretty hard to think abstractly about. I'm a musician and an artist in general. I toured in bands through my 20s. I wrote Rails code in the back of a van for 6 or 7 years. And I think that, my superpower has always been like the person who just is really great at reading and memorizing and like understanding systems. They can't think about things as abstractly as I can. Like, I'm like, well, what if we just delete all the code and don't do that? And they're like, oh yeah, we could just use a message queue. That's the type of thinking that I think will help you keep your job, because LLMs can't do that. And they are going to write better code than us. They basically already do. They struggle with Terraform, but Like, for instance, I was a huge Elixir zealot. I loved Elixir. I went from Ruby on Rails to the Phoenix framework, and I thought it was going to catch on. Turns out people don't like Erlang, and they don't like weird functional programming, but I do. And so I've been learning Rust, and I've been having ChatGPT explain Rust to me in a way that will make me excited about it, like I was excited about Elixir. And so it's just, generate some Rust code, generate some Elixir code, show me the parallels, show me how to make this more functional. And I think that's huge. And that kind of goes back to creative thinking. Like how can I trick my logical brain into learning something that I can get excited about with my creative brain? So my answer is maybe. If you don't want to lose your job, go read a book, get really into jazz, go see some interesting movies, do something to feed your brain besides information.
So if I may, I want to piggyback off of that a little bit. I love that you're blowing this up because I think that's the new way that tech is going in all roles, right? Like if you're not willing to be curious and learn no matter where you're at, like, sorry, bye. You're just wanting to be a butt in a seat, like that's not what's going to get you to that next level today, which is maybe I'm terrible by saying that, but go pick up that book. Like I actually have 3 or 4 of the no starch press books because the no starch press ones are like my go-to when learning something new. And I'm actually like working.
You're the most fun. No Starch actually knows how to write a book that you want to read. So.
Yeah, the no starch. I'm like literally pulling up the one. I've got my stack of engineering books. It's here. Algorithmic Thinking is right here.
Yeah,
like I love these books. I've learned them forever, but because like it's filled that gap of where I'm getting self-taught. But that being said, is again, if you're not willing to be tied, like I've seen product engineers that were amazing product engineers just get laid off because they don't understand what their code is doing. The way that I've been learning, I wanted to piggyback off of this because again, I'm learning Go. I started in the Python stack for my first like production code and then moved into JavaScript, but very much started with the, like I would open up a CLI tool. My first Go project is we're contributing to a CLI tool. And I opened a CLI tool in a Python stack. And I just literally would be like, help me convert this to Go, just so I could see side by side of how the syntax changed and using an AI to kind of walk me through, why does Go work like this? What does this mean? Like being able to ask the stupid questions. Because I think we've all been there in our like coding journey where you're like, I'm scared to do things and I'm scared to ask the dumb question because people might think I'm dumb. My questions are 5,000 times smarter because I'm asking it.
Hey, so I'll call out, there are no dumb questions anymore. Ever.
Cool. I think. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Tessa.
No, you go. I was waiting for you. You go.
Oh, I was gonna say my thoughts are probably pretty well. Besides the spicy take on like it might replace jobs. My thoughts are probably pretty similar. I do think like the fear probably comes from a lot of like the marketing of AI tools like Claude and stuff like that. Like, oh, your friend or replacing a developer. I think Devin even was like, this is a software engineer type of thing. And I know that like their goal, what they're trying to do is they're trying to like anthropomorphize, I hope I'm saying the word right, AI, because they're trying to make it like more relatable to people. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to replace developers because I think you're going to always need someone, like everybody's been saying, that can reason and have context. And even like when there are languages that kind of go out of style or out of date, like COBOL, you still need some of those developers. But again, like everybody's saying, like to me, the key to job security is like being open to learning. I know like when GitHub Copilot was getting more and more popular and I was like advocating for it, because I worked at GitHub, there would be some people that would message me and be like, if this is weird, like coding is going, I don't want to be a software engineer anymore. And I'm like, that's a really weird, to me, a weird way to think. Like you're just holding back yourself from your career. Like technology is going to change. That's the way life is. So being open to that and being intentional as you learn, like Erin was saying, don't just like copy and paste the code. Being like, okay, how did this change this piece of code? Why did this change? Sometimes I ask ChatGPT or Cursor or whatever. I'm like, why did you make this decision? Like just to figure out, is it hallucinating? Do I just not understand like a way that like like, do I just not understand the concept? And that helps me learn things. And then my last point is that I think that coding with AI gives people psychological safety. So to me, it elevates junior engineers' careers rather than like removes it. Because I remember being a junior engineer and trying to ask people on my team for help, but like they would not be willing to. And then also like I was like the odd one out. I'm like the black girl that didn't have like the computer science degree yet. So they're like, we don't want to help you. How come you don't know that? Like they're like rolling their eyes. So it would have been really nice to have like AI at that time and be like, oh, how
That
do I do this?
is a very interesting data point that she brings up. Minorities, when it comes to learning software engineering, have well, we did a research, we did a study on this, and I was part of it. They gravitated more towards co-pilots and Anthropic and ChatGPT and stuff, and asking it questions because they are not comfortable with their their frankly white male counterparts and asking them those questions because they feel dumb and then have it reported back. There's a lot of professional fear with juniors, particularly coming from different backgrounds when it comes to that. And AI has done a great job at alleviating that fear, being able to ask it a question that would be, have a person that has a CS degree or, more conventional background look at you with the side eye, right? I can ask this and it's not going to judge me, right? Now, I like what Roselle said, like that was great. And another thing, piggybacking on what I said about job, it might take jobs. I don't think it's going to take jobs. It's going to take job tasks, right? I think one of the things we've all been said, that's been brought up several times, is that it's going to take away things that we shouldn't have to worry about, like updating dependencies, right? We all know that that is the bane of existence, and iterating over that. Now you can do that now, kind of, but it still is kind of a pain in the butt, right? But it's a lot easier than it was, say, 3-4 years ago. So I really do like a lot of these points that are brought up. But one of the things that I definitely want to touch on in regards to these type of conversations is a lot of people we're asking the wrong question, right? What Roselle said is a great example of you're thinking in a losing mindset. What is this thing going to do? It's going to hurt me versus how can I use this to help me? Right. So I think that's one of the things that we have to start as it starts getting more mainstream. It starts teaching people how to, think of this as a helper and not as as competition. Right. So
Yeah.
Jerome, I got to call that
one
out as
thing,
a superpower. That is such a superpower. Sorry, Tessa.
you're totally fine. I just wanted to add something in really super quick that I think is a good conversation to kind of like untie, because I love how David sort of came in and sort of blew things up. We all are kind of alluding to it, right? But he was very direct about some of the things that it can take off our plate. And I think that's a beautiful approach and a way to think about it, while also thinking about the benefits. But one thing I wanted to bring up is that I started this 99 Dev Problems live stream about 2 weeks ago, and I've interviewed 8 people, I think, or so now. And very consecutively the first week, yeah, Roselle, you'll be on there once you're like, not carrying for your beautiful baby. Been trying to not bug you too much while you're in this beautiful part of life. But anyways, in those interviews, I have had multiple leaders make commentary about developers not understanding the business side of the work that they are doing. And so I think that many people alluded to that and have alluded to it in this group here as we've been chatting around how important that is. And so I think that is a little thread I'd like to kind of like pull at and unweave, right? Of like, what does that mean? And how do we do that? And how are you all seeing that? Because David, I think like you obviously like very much alluded to this with what are these other hobbies? How do you get your brain thinking differently? And I think this is the exact path that you're going down with that, is like, how do you think outside that box instead of like, oh, I'm just writing code to do a thing? And y'all are eager to talk to us.
Yeah.
I have a pretty solid thing that I did to understand business value a bit more. So like I said, I've been in my career for about 18 years. I started out kind of a freelance developer. I've spent most of my life in startups. I worked at Etsy, Glossier, some other less sexy ones. I recently just ended a 2-year run as a sales engineer. I worked for a couple startups, and then I worked at a big enterprise observability company. And if you want to understand the business value and how to like get to it, how to find it, learn sales, learn some medpic, Learn to actually. Oh, Aaron, yes, Braden's one of my homies. We work together now at Pay Near Me. Told you I was a Rails bro. Yeah, go be a sales engineer if you've got the juice to do it. Socially, it will drain you, but it's a great way to learn business value in both selling your product, but also in learning to sell your product, or learning to discover who should buy your product. Like working with other engineers and developers to be like, will this fit into your stack? Will this blah 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 blah? You learn to get to that business value really quickly. So that's just my thought.
So I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I was grilled pretty heavily, so I have 3 degrees, none of them in anything technical. So journalism, art, modern art history, and I have a master's in media innovation. So, very not related to tech at all. However, I will say, and I've gotten grilled and turned down from roles. I do distinctly remember 2 years ago, I applied for a job, was in the final round. They refused to give me the tech exam because I did not have an engineering degree. So I pettily went and did it and found it on open source and did it myself and submitted it. And they were like, wow, I didn't know you could. I'm like, yeah, like kind of rude, but okay, make those assumptions. Anywho, I feel like now I have people that go, you studied business models for media for 2 years. And I'm like, that's literally what I did my research on. It was independent creators and business models and alternative business models. And guess what? The media industry, believe it or not, is not known for stability in business models. Like if you've read any remote turnover about what's happening in the journalism world or the media world right now, it's not great. But it's allowed me like almost a secret superpower because guess what? Dev tools are way easier to think of a business model than a newsletter or a media publication. And now I'm able to almost come in with this like, yes, like, okay, I really struggled and, Jerome really resonated when you were like, it really helps that junior engineer, the person who's scared to ask questions. Like my first dev job, I had a manager that I would say things wrong. Like I said numpy instead of numpy. And they were like, that's not how it's pronounced. And I'm like, okay, I'm reading online. It doesn't have a pronunciation guide here. Like, got it. And it's really helped with that sort of thing. So, but again, like that business model problem, like how many people actually use the code you wrote, which is a great question to ask that not enough people check. Or how do you set up error logs and use logs appropriately?
You could use AI pretty quickly to understand the business value of what you're doing.
Well, and
a bunch of code and figure out what it's actually doing. Harder in the enterprise. I don't know how y'all do it in these big companies.
It can work in enterprise with context across several projects. I've been doing that. It's very, very powerful. What I was going to add a few minutes ago, David, you blew up the first conversation. I'm about to blow up a second. I think that as engineers, we need to be product centric. AI or no AI, we should be able to do the role of whatever we're building software for. I work in banking. I should be able to go and understand how a loan officer does their job. If I can't understand that, I shouldn't be programming it. We need to be product centric, regardless of AI solutions.
I can agree with that to a certain extent. I think that's more of a soft skill than a tech skill, though. And
well, I would argue if you don't understand the role, how can you code it? And so it's definitely a tech skill because you have to be able to take that job function. So I work on loan origination software, right? And so we're setting up all the steps that people are doing on paper in software, and we're putting in all the logic, everything. I have to understand why this logic works a certain way so that I can make sure the software works the right way. If I was the loan officer and doing that role, I also have to understand that. And so I could go and be a loan officer because I can write the software.
And I would argue that is the one thing we do not do enough of. And I say this totally biased. I'm on the developer experience side, but again, our poor product and engineering team has to hear me. Did y'all actually try to do this in incognito for the first time with no history and assume that you know nothing? Like, that's where we need to be, is really using our own products. The number of times that like I've given a demo and I've had a product engineer ask me and they've been like, what? I didn't know people used our product like that. And I'm like, then start talking to customers start using your own tool. And maybe I'm like coming from the more developer advocacy side where I'm like, I can't personally vouch for a tool that I wouldn't use myself. We really have to think about, like, if it's not something you use yourself and we're building that product, like, how do you even have trust in the product that you're building? But the best engineers I've worked with have been the best guinea pigs as well. And it makes the QA process way easier.
You have to understand it.
I'm going to challenge that with, let's say you work at an API company and, all you do is map reduce huge files. I'm never going to understand how to manually on paper map reduce, a 4 terabyte file. Or let's say you work for the government and you're working on an API that coordinates nuclear launch codes across, multiple launch sites. I wouldn't want anyone to know how to do that aside from, maybe, I think that there's not every bit of software corresponds to like a tangible thing that could be understood outside of the context of software.
But
I was about to say,
push back on that. Is that the software you should be working on then? Then go find a software you're passionate about and go work on that.
What if I'm passionate about MapReduce APIs? I might not know how they actually work, in the tangible world, but in code I do.
For what it's worth, I would argue that a MapReduce API, you're basically doing what you would do in Excel, and you're reducing it down. I mean, it's tedious, but you could certainly do it by hand.
And I guess the question is, why are you doing MapReduce? What is the product you're selling? What is someone paying you for?
100%.
So I think that's the thing we don't ask ourselves is like, why are people paying me to do this? I mean, I think AI will force us to become this. It is those of us that like tech for tech's sake, AI will destroy that world, because if I get my way, I will write product specifications and never have to write a line of code ever again, because I don't care about the code. The code is a waste product to get computers to do what we want them to do. And I see it actually as a liability. Like, the more code you write, the worse off your company is. So if we could get to a point where I have to specify the system in some way with some language, I mean, formal specification have existed for decades. And I don't have to like we've been back channeling all our favorite languages. I don't care what language I write in anymore. I've put 13 of them into production. Like, give me a couple of weeks. Yeah, I can do that. But I forget, it was Aaron, but somebody said it, like, if we can focus and encode what the business needs us to do, let the machine compile that to ones and zeros. Like, I don't need source code anymore. I don't need architecture anymore. I don't need any of this stuff we're talking about, because I just tell the machine what I want and it gives me what I want. I don't have to worry about it hallucinating, because I've told it what I want. And if that test doesn't pass, it's not giving me what I want, go back and try again. So I like this idea of escalating us up to product engineers. I think tying this into the conversation we're having earlier, it makes everybody an engineer. It makes product people engineers. It makes designers engineers. So it will eliminate jobs, because we will need less humans telling machines what to do. And how do we move ourselves up the value chain and remain valuable to the business, whether or not we are typing characters on a screen or not? And I think this is where we're moving to, because there's a company out there called Tessel that took, I think it's $25 million, and their CEO gave a talk, and he literally talks about eliminating source code. And I was like, yes, if I never have to look at another line of source code again, I've done my job, because that's adding business value. And what does that look like? What does that world look like? It's not a bunch of us sitting at keyboards typing stuff into machines anymore. So
I love that.
it's gonna push up. It's gonna push up the value chain for sure.
I absolutely love that. Like, I think that's one of the things that, when it comes to my nonprofit work, that is like so riveting for me versus my for-profit work. For-profit work is always, it's just so it's always just the code is the star. Whereas with my nonprofit work, the business outcome is the star, right? I start off what is the problem I'm trying to solve in the real world, which is train a person who may come from a different background than the conventional programmer, from a military background like myself, and help them become a software engineer that can put production ready code into into a code base to get paid for it, right? That's my that's my outcome. Everything I do when I write code begins with that. Like, how do I? What feature can help me with this? What thing can I do that can help me with this? Versus, all right, well, we need to, here's a ticket, and you need to write that. You need to write this, and you need to make subtasks for it. And I was like, okay, yes, but what's the business value? What am I really trying to provide here? What am I really truly, honest to God, doing on with this right now? Versus, hey, I'm out like, oh, I know exactly, what this line of code does, right? I know I've seen things I write actually start conversations, or I've had a troop write a list of APIs to help for veterans, for people to want to like learn how to do APIs. We use APIs in a portfolio, push it on GitHub on our organization, and then end up getting a job from that. Right, it had like 300 stars, and I was like, first and foremost, I'm mad that you have a list that just has the most stars in my organization, but whatever. And secondly, it's super cool that a skill you learn here that is that like core fundamental is something that actually started the conversation and that now put food on your family's table, which is where we need to start having a conversation when it comes to AI. Like, stop talking about the code. We know what AI can do with code. Now let's start talking about what we can use AI to go to this business outcome, right? Like, I get, the conversation still stays really siloed in the hyper technical space. So it feels like the people who love tech, or who love coding for coding's sake, are the ones that are driving the conversation versus the people. I had a very funny conversation about this with a friend of mine, Ken Wheeler. He was like, "Oh, with all these AI tools, the marketing and product bros are going to come in and start learning how to code and with their ideas and stuff, instead of hiring us." And I was like, dude, we are like those bros. Like, neither one of us, both of us learned how to code on accident. I learned how to code because of a commercial, and I couldn't get a job. You were building your rap websites, we both get paid to do this and started doing this, just off of vibes and accident opportunity. So why would we gatekeep this? Like, that we're there. It's just one of those things that when it comes, particularly in this conversation of AI, I feel like we aren't looking at the big picture when it comes to the entirety of the conversation, because we're only focusing on the hard skill, which is it's just not the whole. It's not the whole picture when it comes to tech, right? I'm excited if AI tools makes us more product focused and outcomes focused software engineers, thinking about the business at the end, because that's what we really, I think, part of the problem with tech is we focus so much on the software engineering component. We don't focus on the business skill, right? Like, we even when it comes to data, right? We know that rules of thirds, when 1/3 of like a board is or a team is predominantly women, 1/3 of the team is women, they have better outcomes. We have that data, but people don't really leverage and think about that data when they're talking about, software engineering and stuff. We know that the teams are better when we have more women on the team, but you go to a tech, just name a tech company, you go there and I'm like, oh, it's just wall-to-wall dudes. This is like a frat house. This is horrible. I hate it here already. So like, I mean, I'm hoping that I'm hoping that as AI starts taking some of that mental space away from us, we're able to focus that energy on other things. I would like to go back to playing piano again at some point in time. I haven't touched it once since I learned how to code, because this stuff is hard, y'all. But yeah, like I'm very excited on the whole product engineering and thinking on that line, that frame of thought, and leverage using AI to get there.
I like that, but the bummer is that product people make a lot less money than we do. And that's going to be, I think, the bigger conversation is like, we might not lose our jobs, but as more people can do this easily, more people, can learn like, oh, I know what an API is. I can tell something to make it, but I don't have to know how to make it. We're probably going to start making less money. It's probably going to be a lot more developers doing less work for less money. And
I heard this conversation yesterday, and it was very in line with that. Actually, it says, as a software engineer, we don't get paid for what we do; we get paid for what we know.
we get paid because people think that we know some secret universe that
And
they could never understand.
I know how to build an API. That's cool. Do you know how to make the API performant? How are you scoring your API? Is it readable? Is it maintainable? Is it scalable? Do you have proper tests? I mean, heck, that's one of the conversations that we have to have when we're talking about implementing AI at company scales, because what is production ready code, right? Because if you work with JavaScript developers like how I did, we don't test anything. We are throwing stuff into the wild and being like, Kobe, and then we're done, right?
You don't write tests, you write promises.
Yes, I know. Like, my machine, I can see it. That means that it is tested. So that's how JavaScript engineers first started prior to TypeScript and everything else. That's how it was done. So production ready code is different from that versus when you're having a more robust coding paradigms where you have to do testing, or even worse, how do you score code? We've all probably, if you've been in this industry for more than 10 years, you have been bitten at least once by the rock star engineer who writes code super fast, but it is the most brittle, hard to read code on earth. But that person gets a promotion or goes to another big boy job, and they leave you with this code that frankly you're terrified to touch, which is another thing that AI can help you with. So
it's a lot better to be that guy. That's kind of been my MO for most of my career.
That is a horrible thing, and you should be fired out of a cannon into the sun.
Real quick, I've got another log to throw on the fire here.
Yes.
So I recently had an opportunity to talk with a couple friends at a startup. I'm not going to name the name, but what they're doing is writing code largely with Cursor and V0 and a few other tools. And what they're doing is giving enough of the product description to the AI, and it's spitting out code, and they're largely copying and pasting it in and building their app. And, as I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, wow, this is super brittle. This is not going to work. This is yada, yada, all the things your mind goes to. Well, I had this demo with them where they were showing me how they were working. And then some of my peers and I were in a discussion afterward, and most of us were throwing darts, and we were saying, hey, this will never scale, it'll never work. And one of the gentlemen in the room, he said, does it matter? And I sat there and I was like, what are you talking about? Of course it matters. They have to understand their code. They have to be able to maintain their code, all this stuff. He said, does it matter? And this goes back to Mike's comment about the features, business level features. And what that startup is actually doing is whenever they need an iteration on a business level feature, they just have AI rewrite the whole feature. And I think that's an interesting place for our industry to go. I don't know that I fully agree with the concept, but here's the log on the fire. Go.
That's a very good log to throw on the fire.
I mean, if you can specify the system and know that the system works for some definition of works, why not let AI rewrite the whole thing every morning? I mean, I wrote a blog post on it. We talk about immutable infrastructure. How many people are running immutable infrastructure these days? I don't touch servers anymore. I just spin them up new ones. The whole and I just, what if we had immutable software? What if I never had to change software ever again? But I need some sort of specification that says, hey, the software still does what I want. To your point, it still meets my business needs, but I never change it. I just let AI rewrite it every morning with my changes in my business, in my requirements. How many people does that take? Are we there yet? Maybe not, but like that should be our goal. Like I'm the same way, Chris, where it's like, oh, that's never going to work. It's like, but why not?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if we change the way we're thinking about this? What if we're all wrong? What if it does destroy our industry? Would that be so bad for humanity? I mean, it would be bad for a whole
us.
bunch of us who are making big money doing this. But would it be better for humanity? Would we have lower price software? Would things be less expensive?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are not paying me $200K a year to work on some idea. I don't know. I mean, we talked about self-driving cars destroying the taxi industry and destroying the trucking industry. Like, is that so bad? I don't know. So I think it's a good log. I love business requirements. Like, if you could just specify it, like if I don't ever have to write code again, that's great.
I think you have a good angle that you're like taking this down too, because I think like as we were talking about sort of the business dynamics, and I know I promised not to speak that much, but I want to drop this to let you all sort of like rip this apart in a way and think about it. As like I have a farm, and I'm going to just TLDR this really quick. I have a couple cows, we've got some mini donkeys, some chickens, just a cute little farm, right? We are trying to sustain life. And my major dream is to have a dairy farm. If you don't know anything about dairy farms, they are dying off very, very quickly because they are not paid. Like they're maybe paid 15 cents on a dollar for their milk, and prices don't go up when the milk is short or when butter is in demand. Nothing changes. They barely make profit, and everyone is getting out of the industry. And it's sad to me. Like, I want creamer for my coffee in 5 years. And at the rate it's going, we will not have any dairy products in our hands unless we have a cow. And so what I want to do, and this is my big dream, is to establish a raw dairy. So it's not pasteurized, it's not homogenized, it's raw dairy, raw with all the vitamins in the way that it's supposed to be, but that is currently illegal, which is ridiculous to sell raw milk. So what I want to do is build this business, build this raw dairy, and I want to create the technology that makes it capable for everyone else to also have a dairy so that the dairy business does not die off. So if we even think about outside of just dairy, we think about farming, right? Same situation with beef farming. They're getting paid what they're getting paid, very, very regulated. And technology is so insanely difficult for them to bring in. So farmers aren't bringing in technology unless they're huge and commercial. So how can we, as these smart technical people, come into some of these new businesses where they are lacking technology? Like, could we see that AI could potentially change that? And instead of maybe thinking about, oh, us as software engineers don't have jobs, is that good, right? Are we getting more involved in things that we care about? Coming back to David's passion and artist
I
opinion.
think it's the why and the how. Like, one, let's be honest. What is the last thing that you remember that we had that really like changed people's like jobs? I think cash self-checkout was the big thing.
Advertising.
In my lifetime, it's been self-checkout.
Social media.
It took jobs. Social media hasn't really taken jobs. You can lose your job based on what you post on social media, but not at large or like, taking jobs in mass. But prior to that, it was what? Horses taking it was cars taking horses' jobs, right? So or computers taking
that cotton gin was pretty important.
Yeah,
a little more
I know,
important.
at one point in time, right? I know, right? Especially as a minority, I'm a huge fan of the cotton gin being around. So my people never used it more. But yeah, so I think I want to try to take this Henry Ford approach to it. It was like we truly don't know if the salary is going to go down, right? We don't know. Well, I mean, we might end up being able to get more money because guess what? Now we are able to control the whole company and business, right? I am looking at work now where like there are some people whose goals are to create the first AI-driven, open source, serverless tech startup and company that has, it breaks $1 billion, but has like 4 people in it, right? There are people that, are looking at, I'm one of those people, I'm looking at, how do we make tech equitable when it comes to education while also minimizing the cost, right? It's particularly in the nonprofit space. In my area, with, the AI talks, scared people, right? So a lot of nonprofits have over the past 2 years have shut down, particularly Women Who Code. I think there's another women minority focused one that have all been hit pretty hard in that space where because of a lot of the AI marketing has made junior engineers not look like has made them look like they're not going to be around. You even have there's a nonprofit code school in Colorado in Boulder in Colorado. It's $500,000 from shutting down. As of right now because of how the marketing of AI products is, right? But what do we start looking at it from a point of how do we make this stuff more equitable for everyone? How do we start making it like, all right, we want to make our money. Maybe what happens is instead of you getting $200,000 working with at a 1,000 person company, you're getting $200,000 at a 6-person company or a 2-person company. Could you imagine just the person in sales that gets the contracts, one person who writes all the stuff, and the other person writes all the specs, and the other person that actually talks and prompts the AI and actually audits the code and scores the code and writes the GitHub actions, make sure the pipeline is complete. And then software engineer, once again, it changes. There is no more front end and back end and DevOps and security. Now you have to know your phase zero trust when it comes to security. Now you have to understand DevOps, go into your actions and be able to how do I score my code, this company's code, to make sure that is this $1 billion code that I wrote by myself actually works and doesn't cause any problems, right? How do I make it performant? How to make it readable, right? And one day I'm gonna quit because I'm a billionaire because I'm the only person working at this company, so I gotta be ready to give this code away, and I don't want to make a person want to punch me in the face when I quit, right? So these are the type of questions these are the type of opportunities and questions I think we should be thinking about.
My homie,
Aaron,
my homie
Aaron?
Thomas asked a question in the chat.
Yeah, I'm glad he asked it because it's right on this train.
Perfect.
So fun fact, I mentioned earlier I came from a non-technical background. As much as I think the term technical is bullshit. But I say this and it's like, we're thinking about the software bubble bursting. Do we agree, or is some of it, yes or no, attributable to AI? I would argue that, so flashback, we're going back to the 2000s here. When I first graduated undergrad, the big thing in media was pivot to video. My first job was as a court reporter. I worked for the Reno Gazette-Journal and did local news stories. It was something I will never do again. The reason we are seeing so many news publications go out of jobs right now, because everybody's freaking out about that, is because the inherent business model changed. The business model for media largely was an advertising first business model, which pre-internet works really well. You can only get so many sources. There's only many square inches on the page. And what journalists did is the journalism business industry said, oh, wow, scary, internet, coming, bad, and they didn't adapt their business model. And the business model didn't adapt, and now we're at where we're at now, where we don't have local news in most neighborhoods. And it's very, very scary and terrifying and all of this stuff. Like, access to information is so important, and that is one hill I will die on. But that being said, they are still, how do we follow other industries and we not make those mistakes again? So my specific area of research was business models for media, modeling fandoms and open source. So I got to geek out on like e-commerce and fandoms and how talk to YouTubers were making a living. Very fun, very unique to this business model problem. And I would argue that there's just as much money out there and we'll still need software developers, but it is going to look very different. And the skills you need are very different than what you need. I had a great conversation recently. My husband still works in media, and I was sitting down, and I come from a family of farmers as well. I'm the first in my family I am the third ever in my family to get a high school degree. My brother is a mechanic. My dad grew up on a farm without running water, actually on a dairy farm, actually. Dairy and horses is what my family grew, and trees. So very familiar with that world. And my brother was debating. He has a 2-year AA and hated school. And he was like, do I go back to school and learn how to code? because he's like, I'm doing a little bit right now. And he does like industrial code for like the machine they put in like diesel mechanics, and has started learning that and really enjoys it. But for him, it's a means to an end. He's not using a VS Code. He's not doing any of this. He is literally working in like a Python notebook and an Excel spreadsheet and writing little baby scripts. And I would argue it's the skills that are out there. He doesn't even use Copilot or Cursor. He asks ChatGPT, or he'll text me and be like, sis, can you help me out with this? And it's very interesting because we all are like, this is going to take our job. And I'm arguing that is actually not going to take our job, but the qualifiers of what we need is going to look very different. I think I've been a college professor. I've taught at a university level, and the valuable skill I think you get from school, and I don't even think you need school for it, is the critical thinking. How do you put things together? How do you change the world that way? And I would argue that's why the industries have taken off. It's not because of cool technologies, like it's because they saw a change and they adapted to it. How are we going to do that? I do think the product manager, I actually think the PM role is going to die. That's my spicy take, but that's for another day.
Oh, that is a spicy take. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'll argue with that one.
Having been a former PM, I'm like, I think the PM role is going to die, but that's me.
I'm pro it happening, but at the same time, I don't think it will happen. Like, and I am now. I'm like, yo, that's a spicy meatball. Like, let's talk about that.
The skill won't go away. The role will.
Skill won't. Oh yeah, skill won't. But the role, I think the role won't. But I mean, I think the role will, but the skill won't. I think we'll still need them.
Yeah.
Bring back project managers. I miss that. I miss just like a solid project manager.
Yes,
Why does everyone have to be product? Like,
yeah,
I don't want to see your Figma like layout. I want Jira tickets, and I want you to tell me I'm a good boy when I do them.
I want accountability, right? I want chasing down tasks so there isn't like 2 weeks later and like, oh, I got blocked. Are you what?
That's what I want. That's what I meant.
But
he delivers that so deadpan. I can't tell.
Here's the thing: is I want, like, to Thomas's point, bringing this back here. I think, is it attributable to AI? You could put AI, you could put video, you could put advertising. Insert innovation here. Like, I mean, shit. How many of us had to do? Oh, I'm having a potty mouth today. Sorry, y'all. But how many people had to change? I remember when like GDPR passed and we all had to change. I was in e-commerce at the time. Shout out Tessa. That's actually how we first crossed paths, as being in the chaotic e-commerce world. But we all had to change when GDPR came out, and it was like it was so many people. It were like, I remember businesses had to set up different stores for that. But I know we're coming up on time, so yeah, rant's over. Whew.
This is such a.
We should do a sequel to this,
Yeah,
Tessa.
I agree. Actually,
the project. I miss good project managers.
I don't know how
AI can't be disappointed in me. So the AI can never, like, I have attachment issues and trauma here that can be really used to make me a productive worker, and we can't do that with AI.
I need an AI to do your laundry.
He's a negative reinforcement person. He's been great.
I feel the disappointment from AI when it tries to change all of my code.
Okay, so I'm not even going to get on a tangent, but I wrote something today and it just was like, boom, here's something completely different. And I was like, what are you doing? I think we should continue this conversation. Would y'all be up for like maybe after we let the New Year holiday settle and then we get back in maybe like 2 weeks from now and just refire up this conversation and kind of continue it?
I would have to take the call from Thailand, but I can do that.
Ooh, Thailand. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. Well, let's figure that out. But I think there's more here to be unboxed, because I think we really just like hit the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more in regards to where we can take this, I think. And also I had a question that we didn't even get to of like who. So I'll leave this. Let's talk about this the next time that we get together. The question is, who do we think will benefit from Cursor, AI, all the different sort of support with building tools and coding in terms of the longevity of sort of career? We're seeing junior devs, mid devs, seniors, leaders, etc. Who do we think will benefit most? And we're going to save that answer for the next time. So anyone listening.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it going to help juniors? Is it going to help mid the most? Is it going to help seniors the most? Who do we think it can help the most? And let's take that question into our next conversation. How's that sound? I love it. This has been so great. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to everyone who joined. Thomas, thank you for the question. It was great hanging with all of you on this beautiful Monday. So I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all.
See you
Take
next
care.
year.
Yeah. See you next